My friends, good day. Exactly 1 month ago, the Titan submarine belonging to the company OceanGate imploded near the Titanic. It imploded due to the pressure. Pressure can cause considerable damage, and it doesn't even need to be extremely high. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, there was an oil platform. Underneath, there was a diving bell made up of several chambers separated by airlocks between them. The pressure inside this bell was 9 bar, which is about 80 meters deep. You start with 1 atmosphere at 0, adding 1 each 10 meters, totaling just 9 bar. At one point, one of the guys inside made a wrong move, and unfortunately, this caused a disaster. And one of the workers who was standing near a door with a differential, there was a kind of thick hatch, open, partially open, about 10 centimeters. There were 9 bars of pressure between the two sides of the hatch, and I'm not even talking about hundreds of bars. He was pulverized in that passage. Just to show you that the pressure doesn't need to be enormous to cause damage. In the case of OceanGate, there are things to see. Let me tell you about it. When this submarine imploded, it wasn't a flooding, but an implosion. What's the difference? Imagine gradual flooding, though in submarines it's rarely slow. There was an incident on board an American submarine in the 1960s, this submarine. There was a pipe about the size of a garden hose in terms of diameter that had been poorly welded. It burst. It almost sent the submarine to the bottom, actually. It burst and seawater started coming in through that pipe. The pressure was so great that they took in 18 tons of water. 18,000 liters of water in 3 minutes, that's 100 liters of water per second coming through that pipe. So, if the Titan had suffered a flood, it would have been at those pressures extremely fast anyway. But it wasn't a flood. I'm telling you, when there's a flood, pressure rises gradually until it matches the outside. If there are 380 bars outside, you'll have 380 bars inside. The 380 bars, contrary to what you might think, won't cause that much damage. There are a lot of bodies in various tragedies that have been recovered from very great depths and they were not destroyed. If you take a big leg of lamb, you buy it at the supermarket and you attach it to a scuba diving weight belt. For example, if you throw it into water that's 1,000, 2,000 or 3,000 meters deep, it will sink to the bottom. In the end, it's pretty much in the same state as when you sent it. It won't get crushed by the pressure. Why? Because the reason for that is that since we are generally made up of water, well, the pressure will be transmitted inside the water that we are made of. That pressure will be everywhere. Water can't be crushed. If you take a full bottle of mineral water to 5,000 meters deep and bring it back, nothing changes. Now, if there's a vacuum, that's different. If there's a vacuum inside, then it will get crushed. What gets crushed is where there's a vacuum where the pressure is low. Otherwise, for example, there's no implosion of a human body. Nevertheless, let me tell you a story. I take this can, okay? I take this can. This isn't a Raviange ad. I just always have these cans in my car. Because nowadays, it's extremely hard to find sponsors for videos like this. As soon as we talk about tragedy when we're not into rampant consumerism, it's really hard to find a sponsor. So let me tell you, there are 2 ways to look at things. If this is my submarine, if it gradually fills with water, there are 300 bars, let's say rice, gradually filling with water. You end up with 300 bars inside at most. And yes, that's not it. That's not it. Here's another example to clarify the idea. Look, I have a full can here. I put it on my head like this. There you go. I have the can on my head. What's it doing to me? My can on my head? Nothing. How much does it weigh? It weighs 500 grams, or not even that. It weighs 350 grams, and I have 350 grams on my head. Nothing is happening. But I'll give you another example. Let's imagine now that this can falls from the 5th floor and lands on my head. No, that's something else. Now we're not talking about the same thing anymore. That's extremely violent. So you have to look at 2 things. The pressure, but also the speed at which the pressure comes. And that's where we see a difference between flooding and implosion. When you apply pressure, but you trigger it very quickly, that's a different story. There's an added brutality due to the speed. Let me give you an example. Once when I was a teenager, I went to see a friend of my father's who had a metal workshop. He worked with metal. I'll tell you about machines I've seen and used, even if I don't know their names. One machine came in like this. You insert a piece of metal between two large rollers, press a button, and then get something, I'm not sure what to call it. A mandrel that comes in slowly. It comes in slowly, and then as long as you hold the button, it keeps coming. It comes onto the piece of metal. It does this to it. It twists it. When you want to let go, you let go, and it comes back right there. It's something that comes in with gradual pressure. There was another machine, I don't know its name. Here's what it does. You place your piece of metal like this. There's a kind of big hammer. It moves like this, and then you press a button. It fires off like a rifle bullet, bang, and then it comes back. All right, that one. It can give an incredible amount of pressure compared to the first mechanism, because the first mechanism, if it works, if it manages to give 5 tons, it will give 5 tons, but the second mechanism, the pressure it will give will depend on the weight, the mass of the object, the hammer, but also on the speed at which it goes. So it is capable of reaching extremely high pressures, but in a very short amount of time. We agree, it can't maintain pressure long. The implosion happens in a fraction of a second, that's it. That means we have 380 bars or 300 bars around. You know, when we reach those levels of pressure, it doesn't make much difference whether it's 300, 350 or something else. It's not important. So we have our submarine that's sailing like this between two waters now. The submarine's creaking, it seems. I listened to a testimony. It was creaking all the time, meaning that regularly there were huge explosions that sounded like gunshots, literally. That is, as it went down, the pressure made some of these elements start to give way. Stresses that made them creak. And apparently, on the way back up, these creaks also happened when the pressure was released. So it's something that was structurally extremely strained. It would have deserved extremely thorough inspections between each dive. Except it seems that the company didn't want to go in that direction. So, probably at some point they heard louder, more worrying creaks than usual. So they wanted to go back up. Because that's the thing, and honestly I hope we're wrong about that. What I hope is that there was a sudden implosion with no warning signs and that it was over. Because once the implosion starts, it will probably be over in a fraction of a second. But the warning signs people talk about, I hope they're not true. I hope there weren't any warning signs. Now, what will happen? What will the implosion do? Unlike a flood that gradually fills something up, the implosion will happen very quickly, okay? It will do this. So by happening extremely fast, we get the effect. Remember that workshop I mentioned? We have this tack effect. It's a really powerful system. So if we have 300 bar of pressure, if we have 300 kg per cm2 in terms of pressure at that spot, at the moment of the implosion, we might go up to 2,000, 3,000 kg per cm2. That means that in an instant, the pressure will spike. If we look at it graphically, it will go from 1 atmosphere. There's 1 atmosphere inside the submarine. It will probably spike enormously, exceeding the pressure of the water around it. That's the effect of the implosion because it's the effect of speed. The walls will crash into each other very quickly. And only from that point, in the fraction of a second that follows, will the pressure equalize. With the outside, that means if there are 300 bars outside, well, there will be 300 bars inside, and that's it. The case is closed. From that point, the pieces will gently fall back down into the depths. Those pieces were recovered, so what's interesting when you look at the recovery at the back of the submarine, there's a kind of metal structure with batteries, with white floats. These white floats can be spotted, and they help you know where the bottom is and where the top is. So the part that's at the bottom is the floats, and that's the distal part in relation to the submarine. The proximal part is the other one. And then it's relatively covered. You can't see much, but you can still manage to guess what's in there. What they also covered, what they recovered, are the rings. There are rings here, there's a ring here, there's a ring there. They were recovered and they seem to be in good condition. If we look at this submarine, it has at the ends, it has 2 hemispheres. It has a kind of half sphere here and a half sphere there, the half sphere that's at the back. When we look at these images, it is continuous. It has no opening. It has no window, the one that's towards the front. There's a window. It has a kind of circular window, a circular hole on which a very heavy plexiglass porthole is placed. So Mr. Stockton's idea is actually a genius idea if we look at it, regardless of how the story ended. It's that the opening in its thickness is V-shaped. It's like this, it's V-shaped. And in that V, he placed this part or this element made of glass, or rather plexiglass. He put it in there. And it's pushed by the pressure. The pressure will force it inside the cone as well, and into the conical sections. The pressure pushes it inside, and of course, it will press it in there. He himself said in one of his interviews, he said that during the dive, this cone would move inward. That's what he said. He showed a sort of length of about an inch or a centimeter and a half with his fingers. So this piece of plastic was being pushed with tons and tons, dozens of tons that it was receiving, pushing it inward into this housing. But then, be careful, when we put this part back together, we see that there's a red sling going through it. What we see is that it seems, in all likelihood, that the porthole is no longer in there. So what does that mean? It means that it exploded, probably not necessarily. It didn't necessarily explode, maybe, but maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. But I'll give you a story. It's that at the moment when this porthole, at the moment when we have this implosion, we instantly have a tremendous increase in pressure inside, which gives a pressure equivalent to exceeding the ambient pressure. The porthole, if you look at it, it's in this cone. It's like this, in this cone. Okay, I have this cone and I have this porthole that's inside it. You notice that if it's pushed from the outside, it's held firmly in its place. But if it's pushed from the inside, what happens? It pops right out and comes off easily. I'm not saying a good kick would have pulled it off, but you understand, when the forces are directed from the inside out, this porthole doesn't have much resistance. So if there was that implosion and at some point the pressure inside was too high because the volume was suddenly compressed, well, it's likely that this porthole was expelled. It's likely that it received forces from the inside out. It was expelled. And all that metal banding on the outside with the little screws and everything, it must have popped off without offering any resistance. So can I tell you something? By the way, they found what they called human remains, didn't they? They didn't mention a body. And why aren't they talking about a body? It's because we're in this situation of a brutal blow that goes beyond just simple deep water drowning. All right, now, I'd like to tell you something. I noticed that no one has mentioned this. But what is there in Ballard's 1985 Titanic discovery? There is already a context of underwater tragedy, let me tell you. In 1963, there was an American submarine, the United States ship, very expensive. 129 people on board, a long black cigar 85 meters long. And actually, it leaves the port. It's on a test run, a nuclear submarine. It has a nuclear reactor. It has a mini power station inside, allowing it to store a lot of electricity and stay underwater longer. And actually, they're testing it. After maintenance, it leaves the shipyards and there's a boat on the surface that's following it. They work together, constantly communicating. Every 30 meters, the treasure stops, communicates, and runs water tightness tests. Everything is okay. In these submarines, it only takes a moment. It only takes the slightest leak at the pressures it's under, and then the water rushes in. And we're not talking about thousands of meters here. We're only talking about the United States ship, which, by the way, had a crush depth, a maximum collapse pressure of only 400 meters. That's not any deeper than that. We're not talking about 3,800 meters. It couldn't go down to the Titanic, for example. At one point, things got brutal. About 200 meters in suddenly, the surface, receives an emergency message that it can't understand. And then low quality bubbles rise to the surface. And we never saw the United States ship again. Much later, when they finally managed to explore the place where it sank, they found it in pieces, I think, at about 2,600 meters deep. So that started at the level of the United States Navy, a huge program. I think it's called SubSafe or something like that. A massive program to improve submarine safety. At first, they strictly followed the rules. However, 5 years later, the costly United States ship was simply forgotten. What's happening? We have another submarine, the United States ship Scorpion. It's a Seagull that's just a little bit shorter. 99 to 100 people dead. It's on a mission and suddenly something happens. We never really understood what. It turns around on itself and then implodes, and it goes down into the depths. It goes into the abyss, killing the 99 people. At the time, the Soviets had already lost several submarines. And it's potentially possible, I don't know, it's possible, because in submarines, everything is secret. Really, it's hidden. Everything happens underwater and it's shrouded in secrets. So, if there was an underwater battle, it's not something that would have been widely publicized back then. Lost submarine, second one. Okay, now we arrive in 1985 and the United States Navy has to make regular reports to the American government about the condition of these wrecks. That means they have to visit them, measure them, take photos, measure the radioactivity because both submarines are nuclear submarines. And then probably also make sure that the Chinese, God forbid, don't get involved. The Russians don't come to recover equipment, don't come to recover parts. Why not the nuclear system? It doesn't matter. So they make sure their wreckage is protected. In this context, they provide equipment, so submarines and surface equipment, and all of it to Mr. Ballard, whose main mission was to go photograph those remains and take measurements. 85 now, he didn't feel it, since he had no equipment and only discretion. It's not a pocket submarine with several ships on the surface, and all that doesn't go unnoticed, so Mr. Ballard, what story did he give? What excuse? What alibi did he provide? We're searching for the Titanic, though he wasn't at first, but now he says he is. Meanwhile, he's actually on a mission for the United States Navy. Later, when he finishes the mission, he really wanted to look for the Titanic. He asked the United States Navy if they're kind to let him keep the equipment longer. He tells them he needs the device a bit longer, as a thank you for what I did for you. And I really want to go look for the Titanic so that way I have a real cover. I'm not pretending. I'm looking for the Titanic and don't need to lie. The United States Navy will confirm Mr. Ballard is using this equipment to search for the Titanic. Incidentally, that was near where the United States ship Thrasher and United States ship Scorpion sank. The exact position of these submarines is not known. As far as I know, the United States Navy does not share that information. But it's not very far from the area where the Titanic is. So indeed, he was able to find the Titanic. So just to tell you that even the initial exploration of the Titanic in 1985, that ship which sank in 1912, well, it was already associated with underwater tragedies. So today we'll have more news as the investigation advances, likely involving serious legal issues. If we examine the law here, there are flaws in justice or insurance. There were still extremely serious cases of negligence on the part of OceanGate, now OceanGate. Will they be prosecuted? Maybe, maybe not. It won't go far since the company is broke. Now, there's no point in going to court and getting compensation from a company that, anyway, tomorrow it's going to file for Chapter 11. As they say over there, Chapter 11, so it's going to declare bankruptcy. And that's it. It won't be able to pay. Probably because Mr. Stockton kept talking. He said, I had the fiber at Boeing, but Boeing denies my responsibility. Careful, he says. National Aeronautics and Space Administration in Alabama helped me build the submarine. So then National Aeronautics and Space Administration also ended up on the hot seat as well. He's talking about a company called Toray. Toray is originally a Japanese company, but who is who? Which subsidiaries are located in the United States? And Mr. Stockton, said that it was Toray who really helped him get started. The fiber, as I told you, which was wound linearly, not crossed. Probably because it was a cheaper system. And today we say it still needs to be checked. They say that the fiber was wound around a metal torrent, a kind of metal tube around which the fiber was wound, like this, okay? And afterwards, with chains and everything, they removed the metal tube and they kept the fiber, okay? It's possible. It's possible that they did that now. Why go to so much trouble to remove the metal tube, which could also have been used to reinforce the device? We don't know. We'll see about that later. As the investigation progresses, and if there are any updates, I'll make videos. But let me tell you something just between us. These Titan videos have been extremely popular and widely viewed. Personally, I didn't expect it. I even hesitated to make them. Me, because I really like aviation. On this channel, I talk about aviation, but actually aviation. For me, it's an excuse to discuss engineering and the man-machine interface. People working in nuclear energy watch this channel because they find that here, in the stories that come from aviation, there are lessons and teachings that we can apply to other fields. In fact, where man and machine meet, there is something to say, there is something to do. If you look in this channel, there are stories like the Ford Pinto, the collapse of the Hyatt Bridge. There are plenty of stories like these, which I used to call special editions, but I was doing them less and less. The reason is that I felt like there were so many aviators on the channel now that when I talked about these things, I felt like the audience wasn't happy. So that's why when I prepared the first video about OceanGate, I hesitated to publish it. I hesitated to post it at first, but now it has about 700,000 views, which I honestly didn't expect. Then I made 2 other videos. They were also watched a lot. Then I stopped. I told myself, well, there's no point in riding the wave. I could have made 12 and gotten 1 million views on the last one, but I chose to stop. At some point, I told myself, I'll stop. I've said enough. You have to be honest. You have to say things that come from the heart and things that really add value for the viewers. To the person who is watching, who does me the honor of watching. So I stopped. And today, a month later, I told myself there are still some things that need to be clarified. Thank you for watching. And if you want more videos, like I was saying, aviation for me is just a pretext. If you want more special episodes, I can talk to you about them. There are plenty of things I want to say, but I don't dare to say. On this channel, I might end up creating another one. So thank you, my friends, and I'll see you in the next video.